Welcome to Civic Buzz, a program of the League of Women Voters, Minneapolis. I'm Ellen Van Iwarden, Program Director for the League, and I'll be moderating our presentation tonight. The League is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in all levels of government, works to increase understanding of major policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy, or as we like to say, educate, advocate, empower, repeat. I'm thrilled to be helping the League with this work and encourage you, if you're not already a member, to join us. You can find out more at lwvmpls.org. Tonight, I'm honored to present T. McClenty and Ulla Nilsson of Minnesota 350, who will be speaking to us about their compelling work to stop climate change while creating jobs and reducing inequality. Before I tell you a little bit more about them, I'd like to thank League member Nance Duffy for connecting us with T and Ulla. T. McClenty joined Minnesota 350 as executive director in 2022. Because of the impacts of climate change are experienced much differently by middle-income families than they are for poor, underprivileged, and BIPOC families, T has dedicated her life to ensuring that all communities have access to all the resources available to them. Ulla Nilsson has dedicated much of her life to the idea that a better world is possible. Since she became a mother and learned of climate change in 2008, Ulla has worked passionately to help solve the climate puzzle and uncover the connections between racial, economic, and climate justice. As Minnesota 350's Green New Deal team organizer, Ulla is working to ensure that the rollout and benefits of a green economy are accessible to all communities. So we will have a chance to answer questions at the end of the presentation tonight. T, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Ellen, for that wonderful introduction, and good evening, everyone. It's just exciting to see some of your faces, and those that I can't see, I understand why your camera's off. I know that you're here, and I just want to first thank the League of Women Voters for having Minnesota 350 here with you tonight. I'm excited to be part of this presentation with Ulla, who's an expert on talking about the People's Climate and Equity Plan. But I'm going to first just kind of talk about climate and what climate means. And Ulla, if you don't mind sharing our presentation. So as we know, climate justice goes beyond conservation and individual actions. Climate justice aims to address the oppressive and extractive systems that are at the heart of many of the world's problems. Next slide, please. And Minnesota, or also known as MN350's goal is to unite Minnesotans as part of a global movement to end the pollution damaging our climate, speed the transition to a clean energy, and create a just and healthy future for all. Next slide, please. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the environmental impacts. Next slide. And so what this screen is talking about, that we know that there have been dramatic changes in the past several decades. Climate change increases the chance of flooding, drought, and other extreme weather events. Research has shown that a majority of people, we can go back to that screen, sorry. Research has shown that a majority of people in the US are concerned about climate crisis. And the majority of people in Minnesota want our state to lead in this area. Unfortunately, current policies don't always reflect what the people want. Next slide, please. Environmental impacts on women often hurt first and worst by the impacts of climate change. Women and famine identifying people around the world are on the front lines of the battle to curb and adapt it. As climate change drives conflict across the world, women, and girls face increased vulnerabilities to all forms of gender-based violence, including conflict-related sexual violence, human trafficking, child marriage, and other forms of violence. Climate change impacts falls the heaviest on low-income communities and communities of color, the same communities that are oftentimes have the fewest resources to respond to. People of color are on the front lines of climate change. Black children, 17 and younger, are 34 to 40% more likely to be diagnosed with asthma. The climate crisis is projected to cause an increase in mortality rates for Black people, who are 41 to 61% more likely to die as a result of fine particles and pollution, such as dust, dirt, smoke in the air. Next slide, please. But there are solutions that we can address both in climate and racial crisis at the same time. In order to get to the high-level system change necessary to combat climate crisis, the need to activate a critical mass of people and get them to take action is needed. The fossil fuel industry has a lot of clout and power in Minnesota and beyond. They are fighting to protect their profits. We are fighting to protect the ones that we love. They have the money, but we have the people power. At Minnesota 350, we have many different faces of the work that we do at Minnesota 350. Our work looks like our transportation sector to clean energy, our supporting Indigenous water protectors, educating our elected officials, our food systems work, and many other programs that we do at Minnesota 350. We have many projects working for a clean environment. And so that's the work that we do at Minnesota 350. Next slide, please. While climate action is not always possible at the state and federal levels, we have a real opportunity to make change here and now at the local level. This is where most big movements have started historically, and now is no different than any other time. And I'm going to turn it over to Ula.
Thank you, T, and really excited to be here with you all this evening. I see some familiar names and faces. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the People's Climate and Equity Plan for Minneapolis. People's Climate and Equity Plan is something that came together about a little over a year ago. And the basic idea is that we are working on climate goals. So we're working to prevent the destabilizing force of climate change, moving to clean energy, and also addressing racial and economic disparities at the same time. So these are two big problems that we have here in Minneapolis, some of the worst racial disparities in the nation. And of course, we know that climate change, as T was just saying, is a big deal. So we can solve some of those problems at the same time. And by focusing on equity, we can improve climate outcomes. And by focusing on climate outcomes, we can improve racial equity outcomes. So both of those things support one another. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the basic idea behind the People's Climate and Equity Plan is to set bold goals for both climate and racial justice, and then set up a fund that makes those goals possible. So City of Minneapolis right now is setting up their next 10-year climate action plan. They're going to decide on that in the spring of 2023. And we want to make sure that the goals reflect what's necessary to combat climate change, and also, the racial equity goals that I mentioned. And we want to make sure that we take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act funding. So there's new federal funding that's available that's really going to make it possible for us to completely transform the city. And but we can only do that if the city invests in making sure that this funding is available for everyone. So yeah, the Inflation Reduction Act provides a lot of funding for buildings, for transforming our buildings to clean energy. And but in order to do that, we have to think a little bit bigger, maybe, than some of the ways that we've thought in the past. We need to think about transforming our city block by block or neighborhood by neighborhood, rather than just house by house. So there are some things that we can do if we think big, and if the city is helping coordinate and educate and move this and utilize the Inflation Reduction Act funding. And so some of that looks like, just doing deep energy retrofits, insulating houses so that we're not wasting energy, and electrifying houses so that we are removing greenhouse gas pollution from fossil gas, and also improving indoor air quality. So we want to make sure that everybody in the entire city has access to be able to get those benefits. And in order to do that, not every single person. So Inflation Reduction Act money, there's a lot of money available, about $14,000 per household, and households should be seeing a lot of savings if they invest in that. But not everybody pays taxes, and so they can't receive the tax credits, or maybe they don't have the money to do the work and then get the rebate afterwards. So if the city can step up and coordinate and provide the ability for everyone to get those benefits, then we can do the work on a larger scale, like I was saying, block by block or neighborhood by neighborhood. That allows us to access new renewable resources like networked geothermal, which is something that doesn't make sense for a single family home, but does make sense on a larger scale, so that new renewable resources could become available. And then we can at the same time, by providing benefits to everyone, we can eliminate the energy cost burden for residences, that for folks that are paying a very high percentage right now of their income on energy. So deep energy retrofits, electrifying all buildings by 2030 is part of the plan. And part of the reason that we're focused on buildings is that buildings in Minneapolis make up 75% of the greenhouse gas pollution. So within the city, it's the majority of the pollution, and it is also something that the city has relative control over compared to transportation or other things that are more of a regional issue. So it's really something that the city can take care of. And like I said, with new federal funding, we have the opportunity to really completely transform the city. And build out clean energy. So move to electricity and build out solar, geothermal, and microgrids, so that our energy that is coming through the electric grid is clean. Sharing energy between buildings is something called district energy. And making sure that, that our low-income residents are not bearing the brunt of the energy transition costs. So another part of our platform is making sure that as we're doing this, we are building community wealth, eliminating economic disparities and the racial wealth gap. And another thing that, as I was saying, if we go big, we do this on a larger scale, that allows the contractors that hire union labor and do larger scale projects to be involved. So that would mean that the jobs that are created would be family sustaining union jobs. And we are working part of our coalition. Some of our coalition members are working right now to make sure that union careers in the construction industry are accessible to marginalized communities. So immigrant communities, folks that have been formerly incarcerated, people that may not have transportation or childcare. So really looking at what are the barriers to people getting into these good careers, and also supporting contractors of color to get set up. So that is some of the work that's kind of wrapped into what we're doing as a coalition. We also want to make sure that as the city is investing in climate action, that communities especially in the green zones, have a voice in how that investment rolls out. So green zones are parts of Minneapolis where it is majority people of color, majority low income, and also the most polluted places. So where those three things come together. And so really wanting to make sure that folks in those communities have a voice in how investment is made so that it can address the issues that they're facing. Another piece of what we want to do is making sure that our neighborhoods are resilient to heat and other weather type stuff, and that they're connected by carbon-free transportation. So the federal money right now is the Inflation Reduction Act money is mainly directed at electric vehicles. So for us, it's important that the city also invest in transit for those who cannot afford to buy electric vehicles. And transit is one way to reduce traffic, make it safer, and just make it more equitable. And a lot of cities that are moving towards transit are more pleasant. Biking, walking, and transit makes a city more of a pleasant place to be. So making that accessible. We also want to make sure that the neighborhoods that have had the most air pollution, that we are working to reduce, remove that pollution so that the air, water, and land is healthy. And doing things that protect folks that are vulnerable to heat, cooling centers, planting more trees, making sure that we have resilience plans for whatever kinds of climate changes we're already seeing. And here's a picture of some of the things that we've been doing over the past year. So MN 350 is working in coalition with other organizations, but we're the ones that have been doing most of the organizing. So we've been out talking to folks at open streets. We had a series of house parties. Well, we had local artists design postcards, and we sent postcards to city council members. And so over the past year, we've engaged 1,800 people, 800 in 65 events. So 800 of those people were brand new to MN 350. We have set up teams in every ward of the city, and we've met twice with every city council member. We've met with the mayor, and we are working with a coalition of racial and economic justice groups, unions, energy democracy folks, other climate groups. So we have a growing team of organizations that are getting excited about this work, and things are going well. So excited about the momentum that we have been able to build over this past year. And I will we can talk a little bit more about this in the Q&A, but there is, we know that there's some interest from the council and the mayor in the plan, and we also know that polluters are not going to want to raise the funds to stop polluting. So we are working with the council, working with the mayor, and wanting to show them how much support that we know that there is for this plan by calling them regularly over the winter and connecting with them. So we're having a training on November 17th, and I can put the link in the chat in a little bit here. But if you're interested in connecting with this work, that's one way to do it. We also, if you're interested in connecting with the team in your ward, there's a link here. And today is the first day of Give to the Max. So there's also opportunity to support the work in that way. And I'm going to turn it back to T to close out our presentation.
Thank you, Ula. Lots of information. And so there's other ways that you can get involved as well with Minnesota 350. Earlier, I talked about the other programs that we have at MN 350 or pipeline work. You may have heard about Line 3. We are working in partnership with Line 5 now, helping them know about lessons learned from Line 3 and best practices and other ways that you can get involved at MN 350. And so we can't do the work without our volunteers, and we have a large volunteer base, so there's always room for more people to get involved, even if that means phone calls, calling other people to ask them if they can get involved. And I believe that's the end of our presentation. I think we wanted to save most of our time to answer questions that you guys may have for Ula and I to talk about Minnesota 350 or the People's Climate Equity Plan. But we want to thank you for your time and hearing our PowerPoint presentation. Now we will just turn it back over to you, Ellen.
Great. Thank you both so much. It's really interesting, and I look forward to our questions. So if people want to raise their hands, I can call on people, and we'll get started.
I see Vicky in the chat says she had a question.
Okay. Vicky.
Sorry, I was busy typing. So I was wondering what your funding source is and what is your relationship to the People's Climate Plan? What is the relationship of that to the Minneapolis plan?
So you're asking about the funding source that we are proposing for the People's Climate and Equity Plan?
Or yeah,
Or for MN 350?
Minnesota 350, what is okay. Your funding source?
I'll let T answer that.
Yeah, right now, it's coming out of our general operating budget. And so as you know, as a nonprofit, we receive funds from donors. As Ula just talked about, we just started our Give to the Max. So we're asking our donors or new volunteers to please donate to MN 350 so that we can continue the work that we are doing. And the donation is really important because when we receive grants from our great funders, there's always gaps. And so we are able to fill those gaps through our general budget, and that's through our donations and through our grants.
Okay.
And Campbell.
Hi, thank you both for this presentation. I've really appreciated it. I had a couple of questions, but the first one that came to mind was I'm watching all of these apartment complexes go up around Minneapolis, north and south. And I'm wondering if there, what influence does the city or MN 350 have on improving green energy solutions in all of the big buildings that are being built, apartment buildings in particular? Do you have any insight into that?
So yeah, part of what the climate action plan will do is so Minneapolis is going to, decide how are we going to move forward with clean energy. And while we cannot just say the building code is this, like the building code is decided at the state level. So Minneapolis can't upgrade their building code. What we can do is say, if you decide to use fossil gas, for example, and if you decide to have a building that is not very well insulated, in a few years, that is going to incur further costs. And so we will help you transition now to clean energy, to insulate your building so that you don't have to pay those costs later on. So that's the basic idea of what we are proposing to the city.
Thank
And
you.
if it's okay, I wanted to go back to Vicky Olson. I don't know, Vicky, did we answer your question or did you have a follow-up to that? It looks like that you was going to ask another question.
Oh, sorry.
Well, my other question was, what is the relationship between the people's climate plan and the city climate plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the city is rewriting their 10-year climate action plan, and MN 350 and our coalition, the Just Transition Fund Coalition, is asking the city to set certain goals. So we are participating in the process in order to set really good, strong goals and to make sure that we have funding in order to meet those goals. So one thing that has happened in the past, I think in Minneapolis and other cities, is that a really lovely climate action plan gets written down on a piece of paper and that sits at City Hall, and then not very much happens with it because there's not the money to do it. So we want to set up this fund so that the city actually has the ability to meet those goals.
And then Ola, if it's okay, if I can just give an observation. I don't know if it's your headphones, but there's like an echo and a ruffling. Okay. I think Julie's hand was up next.
Yes, Julie Wallace.
Yes, thank you. My question is, you talked about supporting district energy, and could you be very specific about exactly what you would plan to be doing in order to support district energy? Because it seems to be hard. It's a wonderful idea, but it's very hard to implement.
So there is district energy already set up in some places in downtown Minneapolis, for example, but it's not really being utilized. So I am not an expert on district energy, but I know that if we were to access, to put in something like networked geothermal, and I'm wondering if I am hearing a little bit of feedback. I'm wondering if people could mute themselves if they're not talking, if that might support getting rid of the feedback. But it is an investment to network the various to connect buildings. It's an initial investment, but then it pays for itself over time. That's my understanding.
Yeah, but what are you going to actually do?
Well, the city would need to be the ones to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, it requires, like, when you are replacing a street and when you're already doing street work, then you have the opportunity to lay pipes in that can connect various buildings and houses, and places like a supermarket, for example, have a lot of excess heat. So it's good for them to be able to move heat out of their building, and where, other buildings might need heat. So it's one of those kind of amazing things where you can share energy and balance the needs of various parts of the community through networked energy systems. Judy, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm going back to the question on the buildings and how to help move forward in terms of making sure the buildings are energy efficient. And if I understood the response, it was really more around new buildings. And I was wondering what are the policies or programs you're advocating for existing buildings, and especially existing single family homes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we are advocating that the city set up a kind of support center to help people access the funding that is available from the Inflation Reduction Act, the federal funding. So there's a lot of money available for energy efficiency, for electric appliances, for insulation, and we want to make sure that everyone has access to those benefits. So for that, there would be a fund available for those that don't pay taxes and so can't get a tax benefit. Kind of, there's certain benefits. Some of them are rebates and some of them are tax incentives, but so that it would be available to everybody, and just making sure that we are kind of like the I don't know if you live in South Minneapolis, but where, if you're near the airport, there was a time when lots of people had their windows upgraded and their air conditioning systems upgraded all at the same time. So it made sense to do that block by block, and just do a whole area at one time. So the idea is to let people know that this opportunity exists and support people to be able to access the funds and federal funds or city funds, as the case may be, and then be able to do that work on a large scale. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
These are great questions. We're hoping there's more questions or comments. Jane?
Yeah, well, you've kind of intrigued me with your comment about sharing energy with taking heat out of a building and sharing it with a building that needs heat. And I wondered, do you have any information about larger resources of that might be available in different neighborhoods in the city? I know my understanding was that Southdale, for example, was built over an aquifer, and they cycle all of the air from their building through the water in the aquifer, so they didn't need air conditioning, which is what large buildings need to offset the heat from lighting and that sort of thing. So it was a tremendous advantage to Southdale to be over that aquifer. Do you know about other opportunities like that for the sharing of, being able to use natural resources in our city to facilitate those kinds of things?
Yeah, so I interviewed somebody from the Pipe Fitters Union who was very excited about this. And pipe fitters traditionally have worked in coal-fired power plants and other fossil fuel industries. And they are super excited about the geothermal potential in the Twin Cities. I think that there are big aquifers below Minneapolis and St. Paul. And there's a new kind of geothermal technology where you run a pipe with potable water down into the aquifer, and because it's water to water heat transfer, it's very efficient. So basically you can be running, 50-degree water by moving that potable water around, running that into buildings and having a constant source of 50 degrees. So whether you want to cool yourself down in the summer or warm yourself up in the winter, that makes the heat pumps that is part of what the federal funding will cover for buildings, makes the heat pumps a lot more efficient if you are starting at 50 degrees rather than starting at, negative 10 degrees or starting at, 80 degrees. So that kind of resource is something that it would, really only make sense to do in a large area. That it's too expensive for one house to do it. But if you are doing it in a large area, that is just, that 50 degrees is just down there under the ground. And so if you can set that system up, you reap the benefits over many, many years.
And do you know if the city has people who are looking into those kinds of sources?
We are in conversation with the city about, potentially doing a pilot or The folks, the pipe fitters, are working with a company called Darcy Solutions, and they did a project at the pipe fitters building, and they said that with this new geothermal technology, they were able to just drill 2 wells versus in the past for the old geothermal technology, they maybe would have had to drill like 30 wells for a similar size building. So it's a lot more efficient, and they have been very happy. You know, that's how they've been cooling their big Union Hall building. Susan?
Hello, I'm Susan Hellstrom and I live in Ward 13, and I will start by saying that I'm doing a little cheerleader for this as one of your league members, because I am on our team, and Ula is our team coach support person, and so I've been seeing her a lot, which is wonderful. What this plan will do is it will so expedite all of this work compared to probably what the city's going to come forward with, which I think is really the game changer. And, you know, we keep hearing how we're not meeting, like globally, people are not meeting their climate pledges. And this could really put Minneapolis on the map. That's not really the goal, but it could, because it would just it would just mitigate climate problems so much more quickly than if we go the pace that we would need to go if we don't create the funding opportunity to get it done. And then the fact that it's pretty much creating a workforce that is going to be dedicated to people who are underemployed, have barriers to employment, and that's just so great for our city. So I would love to talk with anybody about this. Anyone who lives in Ward 13. We're having an event on November 15th to try to grow our team. And if it's okay with Ellen, I'm going to put that in the chat so people know about it, and maybe shoot you all an email afterwards. But this is so important. And I think what MN350 is doing is trying to grow the grassroots movement to really demonstrate to our city council people that we want this. So it's critical we get as many people as possible supporting this plan. Now, that said, well, I'm wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit more about how the funding source is going to be generated, because I mean, that is a question I think that people kind of want to have a handle on before maybe signing on to support it, just to better understand it. And then I'm also, I mean, this is, and I've been to a number of trainings, but not every training with MN350. If maybe you could kind of walk us through what, if things materialize the way the coalition will like it to, what would be sort of the practical experience of someone like people on this call for doing the work on their house versus like people living in the green zones, just to kind of give this a little bit more shape for people? I think that might be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, what would it look like if we have this plan in place? I think, right now there's the Inflation Reduction Act funding goes into effect in January. And like I said, there's about $14,000 of money available to households. But that money is like, hanging up on a very high tree, and you're going to need a forklift or, something to get up there. Like, not everybody has the skills or the tools to be able to access that funding. And so if the city doesn't provide support for people to access it, it is only a very few people that are going to have the understanding to hire a contractor, to go through the process of getting the funding, doing the complicated tax stuff or taking out a loan and getting a rebate. There'll be a few people that would access it, versus if the city can provide a kind of one-stop shop that supports people in doing these things and sets a goal for all right, we want to support the folks in the green zones first, because that's where people are least likely to be able to access this on their own. It's where most of the pollution happens. It's where people are right now paying very high percentage of their income for energy costs. And so are the ones that are suffering the most from the fact that their houses are not very well insulated, that we're wasting tons and tons of energy. We want to make sure that the benefits get to those folks first, because the other thing that we know is that fossil gas prices are going up because of the situation in the world, because of what happened in Texas last year. The price of fossil gas, otherwise known as natural gas, is very volatile and is going to be going up and is going to be causing people hardship. So we want to help prevent people from having to pay those high prices and to be able to transition to clean energy. So if the city can provide that support and roll something out, neighborhood by neighborhood, then we can really meet our goal of transitioning all of our buildings to clean energy, improving health outcomes. One thing about burning gas inside your home is that it contributes to asthma. There's really toxic chemicals in there. The American Medical Association recently came out with a new study about just how bad it is for you. If that level of pollution existed outside your home, it would be illegal, but because it's inside your house, it's not illegal. It's your own business. So we want all of those benefits to be available to people that are already suffering the most asthma, the most health complications from air pollution. So
Ola, I was going to say, where can someone get details about the city's plan?
Yeah, so the city is in the process of writing a plan. They don't have a plan yet. There are working groups that are working on the plan, and our proposal is one of the things that's being considered. And I think that we have a lot of coalition members that are working with the city to write a good plan. So we want to write kind of a good map. How can we get to the climate and racial equity goals that we want? That piece, writing the plan, is really not the hard part. The hard part is, how do we raise the funds to actually make this happen? How do we decide this is important enough that we need to invest in it? Mm-hmm. And so Susan was asking about the funding mechanism. There are 3 different funding mechanisms that we are putting forward, and each one is kind of good for a different piece of the stuff. But one of the main ones that we're talking about is something called the Pollution Control Annual Registration, otherwise known as PCAR. It is PCAR is a pollution, it's a fee on pollutants that is used right now for many other pollutants in the city. So, dry cleaners, I don't know what all the different pollutants are, but the people pay a fee, and that money has to be used to remove or reduce the harm from that pollution. So in the case of fossil gas, the city has already decided in 2019 that fossil gas is harmful, and it should be 1 ton of fossil gas causes approximately $42 per ton harm. Like the amount of money that we're going to quantify, how much harm does it cause? They said $42 a ton. So something called social cost of carbon. You don't have to remember that term, but essentially it's like putting a dollar amount on how much harm this pollutant causes. And in 2019, the city said greenhouse gases, are worth $42 a ton. So, but that's just something that's written down on a piece of paper right now. We want to actually use that and say, if that's how much harm it's causing us, then that's how much money we should charge polluters for continuing to use fossil gas. If we charged all of the building, just looking at buildings, all of the greenhouse gases associated with buildings, $42 a ton, that would equal approximately $110 million every year. So there's a lot of tons of pollution going out. And we are not saying that we should put that fee on next year and raise it all the way. We're saying little by little, starting at $4 and going up over a period of 6 or 7 years, so that the first year the fees would be very small, but that that it's going to be if you're continuing to pollute, that those fees are going to be getting bigger. So this is a great time to make the changes. Participate in the Inflation Reduction Act program, move to clean electricity, insulate your home, and that the big buildings do those things as well. So that's one of the funding mechanisms. We're also in conversation with folks at the city about the franchise fee, which is currently used to generate climate funds, and also mechanism that's similar to what Portland used. So I didn't mention that Portland has a clean energy fund that they set up a couple of years ago, and they are generating currently between $60 and $80 million every year for climate and clean energy projects. And the way that they did it was by a gross receipts tax on corporations making over $1 billion. So that method did not raise any prices for anybody in Portland. And there's a similar mechanism that we could use here in Minneapolis. So the funding mechanism is, we're in conversation with the city council, with the mayor's office about what it might look like. But whenever you raise money, there is pushback. And that is the reason that we are getting people together all over the city to say, this is important. We need to address climate change. It is far, we are really late in addressing it, but there is still time and we need to do it now. And that, this is important enough to invest in. So, so that's why we are out talking to folks. We are doing trainings. We have folks in every ward that are meeting together and meeting with their city council members and, standing up and saying, this is important. So I see some other hands.
Yeah, we have only about 8 minutes left. So maybe we can catch some comments in the chat, and then Ann and Judy. Miss Ann, I think you're next, and then Judy.
Oh, I thought you wanted to do the chat first.
No.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm wondering, I came late, I'm sorry, so I missed the first part, but are you collaborating with groups like Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy? Are you working with different groups as well?
We have a coalition of 17 different organizations that we're working with.
So my question is, how is the city responding to Minnesota 350? Is it a collaborative kind of interaction or?
Yeah, so the city sustainability department staff are very excited about this because they have wanted to do more for many years and they have not had the funding to do it. So they feel like this is great and super important, and they are excited. And the city council members and the mayor, I think, they are the ones who are going to get the pushback from whatever funding mechanism is chosen. Raising money is always controversial, and so they're the ones that are going to hear about it if they're trying to raise money. So that's where it is. But I think right now, in the city budget negotiations, there is essentially no money for climate stuff. There's a little bit of money for tree planting, a very small amount for just the continuing programs of the city sustainability department. But there's, frozen positions. So I think that there's an understanding that there is a need to fund climate programs, but I think the question is the city council and the mayor willing to go big enough that we can actually do this at the scale that's required both for climate and to reap the equity benefits?
So I'm also sitting here thinking, okay, now I have a gas stove. And so many people say it's just so much better to be able to cook with gas fire. And I have a gas fireplace. So and I'm just one townhouse. So how many tons do I use? Tons? Or I don't even know. I mean, I'd have to look at that. But I'm thinking, this is going to be also a matter of educating people that what we're used to and what we think is best for our whatever, is not anymore. It's not working anymore. And we're all going to have to pay more to keep these little things going. But eventually, like you're saying, we have to wean ourselves off of all of this. But how much does one household use in terms of this tonnage that you were talking about?
I'm not sure. Yeah, that's a good question.
All right, I'll look into it.
I don't know.
I will find out.
Yeah.
But I can just.
I see a hand from Judy.
Let's see, there we go. I kind of building on, what Anna just mentioned at the end, and that has to do with education. I did put in a heat pump system that goes down to minus 13 degrees into my house this past September. But in doing that, and I also insulated, but in doing that, and I have a plan to do other things, but I had to do a lot of research and a lot of understanding. And it was not easy to get the information. And when one talks with, for instance, contractors, their first thing is, well, it's not going to pay out. And I said, well, I don't care about it paying out. I said, I want to reduce my gas usage to zero. And some of the contractors got it and some didn't. But I guess my point is that for someone like me who has an engineering background, understands these things, has the time to research, I could go do all that. What is in the plan to help educate people on how to do this? Because many people that the plans looking to impact and have enrolled, there's one thing around the money, but the other thing is, how do they even know how to get started? And how do they know how to sort through the misinformation that is being thrown at them all the time?
Yeah. Yep. That is so important. And that is part of what we want funding for the city to do education. And we also want funding for local organizations that are trusted by the community to be part of that education program. And like you mentioned, there needs to be education for contractors, because I have heard recently people saying, oh yeah, they told me I couldn't do a heat pump. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You totally can do a heat pump. But that's what a lot of contractors aren't used to it. It's new for them. And so educating the contractors as well. So that is part of what we see is really necessary in order to support this big transition, is a lot of education and supporting from many different angles. The city can say it, but we need community groups to be saying it. we need the unions to come out and talk about it. So Diane?
Hi, thank you. I also came late. I apologize. You started right on time. My household participates in something called Clean Choice Energy, and that's offered through Excel Energy. And we participate. It's a solar garden program, and so I generally have a very, very low bill every month on my. I always get confused. I'm new to Minnesota. So whatever that is, gas or electricity, it's very low. So somebody tell me it's gas or it's electricity. But anyway, what do you think about those programs that are offered by Excel Energy? And what I really want to say about that is that, again, I don't think people are being educated on these things. I was mentioning that to a friend of mine this week, and he said, "What is that?" I mean, he's a lifelong Minnesotan, and he didn't know about these programs that are being offered by Excel Energy and our other energy companies here. So those are programs that we can also tap into to initially reduce, if you don't have a house that can support your own solar panels, for instance, or that kind of thing. Or so just so you know, you can call Excel Energy. Some of their programs are not that great, but this one for us has been very financially good, and hopefully, we're contributing to reduction in fossil fuel use. So
Yeah, I'm glad you've had a good experience with that, and I know that Excel is doing some work to move to clean energy. They have also sometimes been standing in the way of some of the local transition to solar and community solar gardens and other, like, I think, as one of the big energy monopolies, they like the idea that they are the ones that control the energy and have been resistant to community-owned clean energy resources. But it is something that the city and some of our partner organizations are working with them on the Clean Energy Partnership. And one thing that I have heard recently that inspired me was some experience from folks out in Boston with the gas utility, that they are seeing geothermal as the way of the future and are starting to understand that instead of seeing themselves as a gas provider, they are seeing themselves as a networked geothermal provider. So it's very similar kind of, pipes running under the street and connecting from one house, to a main line, all connected. So there are utilities that are starting to see their place as being part of the clean energy future. So yeah, it's exciting.
So I have one other question real quick. Are you participating? I know Susan and I attended, Linnea Palmisano had a meeting at in Mount Olivet last week, I believe it was, where we attended, where she gave a presentation on the city's, what they're doing with the environment, their environmental plan and sustainability plan for the city. And a lot of conversation was revolved around the health commissioner and what they're trying to do with households around the city that don't have insulation, or they don't have the necessary things to improve their personal environment in their homes. But the one thing that I was impressed with was a number of trees that they're planning to plant in the city of Minneapolis, the canopy, and especially in those underserved communities where there are a lot of renters, and coming up with a plan so that those landlords would be incentivized to take care of the trees that the city plants. So I don't know if you're familiar with that program, and it's by Green Minneapolis, and David, I don't know his last name.
Yeah, I was at that event and I heard them talking about it. We are not so much focused on trees, although trees are obviously one important piece of the puzzle. And I know that the city budget does have money in it for tree planting. So I know it's important, especially with the emerald ash borer issue. Yeah,
Thank you for being here.
thanks.
Ellen, we want to be respectful of time. I see that we're right at 8 o'clock.
Yes, thank you guys so much. This has been great and great questions. I look forward to our discussion at our unit meetings, and good luck to you.
Thank
So-
you. Thank you again for having us.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Great questions.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
And I'll put
Thank
the
you.
date for the Ward 13 meeting in. If you're interested, come hear more about it. Pershing Park. We'd love to have you.